Hello and welcome to another Nimble video tutorial. I wanted to hurry up and build this second video regarding digest cycle and refactoring. And this is it's a from the hip idea. I wanted to take some time to show some of the code, because one thing you notice about Nimblev5, if you compare to other frameworks or JavaScript libraries, if you go to another framework, the first thing you're going to do is see someone is going to overwhelm you with code, and then see someone open up a IDE, what they call an IDE, which is just a text editor, and they're going to overwhelm you with how to code your project and how you have to style your project and do certain things, and force you into their design style. And that's not what Nimble is about. Nimble is a tool, so it kind of does most of the coding part for you. I wanted to say that, but I do wanted to give you a chance to look at and to talk about some lessons learned and some new features that I learned when I worked on the Trillo clone project. If you remember from the previous video, I was able to use my digest cycle code snippet to build a pretty complicated UI that has a horizontal digest cycle, and within it multiple vertical digest cycles that are dynamically added at the time it's built. You'll notice I have a detailed dialog for each one of these. It's fully functional as far as the UI and the linking of the events and the different panels that appear. But the original digest cycle that I created for that was for a single instance to-do list, and basically the code was this, I guess, 20 or so lines of JavaScript. And I'll explain it. The first thing you do is you establish a item manager, which is just your list, a callback function that you can now that you use that when the items are published or pushed to the screen. This callback function allows you to make alterations to the view if you need. So it tracks every instance of the item and allows you to alter it or even use MVC and push data into the view dynamically. And then this is the list view manager, which is nothing more than a series of the collections factory and the items already displayed or the items about to be displayed into the view. It calls a digest function, which does the work. An instance of this list manager is usually stored on the code object of the dialog that it runs. So when this is applied to any dialog, you have basically a digest cycle that you can now push items into an array and watch them appear in lists. It's a pretty simple piece of code, but the simplicity of this original design was really exposed or came to its limit when I had to design something a little more complicated, such as this Kanban board. But fear not, by simply wrapping that function and wrapping that piece of script and building a full factory around it, you're able to encapsulate code as well as add much more functionality and expose a interface that now allows you to control multiple instances of digest cycles any way you want. The digest cycle as a unit is just simply the ability to draw in a series to a targeted area. That is the only unit of functionality that it performs. By wrapping it into a factory, you can do that in any way you want, in any direction you want, on any target you want, multiple times. So I did that. I wrapped into a factory, and then I used it to make a better digest cycle. Originally, here's a little diagram of what the digest cycle does. It would have hooks. The digest manager has hooks into the code and the events area of the singleton dialog object. But under the new factory design, it's a independent factory that just simply pushes instances on the end of the code module of your dialog singleton. So you can have multiple instances on any dialog, and it kind of runs separately and independently, and it's a much cleaner design. If we take a look at the code, instead of the original line of code, you simply declare a new factory instance of the digest cycle where you can give it its unique name, the dialog and the control. That's the target that the drawing is going to take place, or the items will appear. And then you simply get the digest manager at any time you want on the dialog and the name, the unique name that you gave it, and you can simply set data and update. So in four lines of code, 3 lines of code, you have a fully controlled digest cycle where the digest manager allows you to push elements, set a full array of elements, remove elements, or whatever, normal array type functionality, and then simply calling update does the drawing. And you can totally control how and where an array of elements is drawn to the DOM. The format, the digest item format is pretty simple. I allow you to have a group type so that you can have multiple display arrays that display in multiple different ways by having different groups of arrays, and you can simply set the group type and call update, and a new list of items will display inside the same list. A key, which is not required, it's optional, and that will represent any key name that you would want to store on the element, so that you could pull it back and know if it was clicked, you would be able to identify by the key. And then of course the dialog that's going to draw in the element. The most powerful part about the digest cycle is that each one of these elements, though they appear to be a control, are a full surface dialog. So therefore you can lay out a full surface dialog and push it into another dialog so it will appear as a control, embedding all the functionality and wrapping all the functionality of a form inside in another form to give you an extensive amount of power within your digest cycle. Last but not least, you can list out any properties, attributes, or styles using the Nimble naming design to set or control any of the elements that are on your dialog, and then style them appropriately, such as adding a tooltip, setting a caption, all within the digest item. Push that to an array, send it to the digest manager, and call update. As simple as 1, 2, 3. I just wanted to give you a look at how and when I refactor code. Usually my code is functional units of source. Once I find a good limitation, or once I reach a limitation in an original design, usually it just has to be wrapped into a object-oriented pattern such as a factory or class, and then it will just open up a whole world of power. That's all the source code I'm going to show you this season probably. Everything else is going to be pure results and output. The Nimble solution. Thank you for watching.